Welcome to this mock consulting case with Paul. I'm John. I'm an ex-Bain consultant and a coach on IGotAnOffer. Paul, would you mind introducing yourself?
Not at all, John. I'm Paul. I'm ex-McKinsey. I'm ex-Accenture. I'm ex-Ashridge Consulting, which is part of Ashridge Business School, and I now work for Talek and Company doing, on the whole, sustainability-based consulting.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Great. So let's start with our case today. So Bulletproof Co. is a software company involved in cybersecurity products located in the US. Bulletproof's revenues grew by 10% from 2005 to 2006. However, their profits were flat from 2005 to 2006. So the two questions that our client has for us are, why have Bulletproof's profits been flat, and how can they increase their profits?
Okay. Just to make sure I fully understand our client's need, how about I play back to you what I heard you say, and we can check we're on the same page?
Yeah? Perfect.
So our client is Bulletproof Company. It's a software company in the security field based in the US. Their revenues have grown 10% from last year to this year. However, their profits have been flat across those 2 years. And the questions in the mind of our client right now are, why are those profits being flat, and how can they increase them? Does that sound about right?
That's all exactly right. My only thing is that let's imagine, I think this case is set in 2005. So let's think of it not in 2024, as if we were living in 2005.
Yes, indeed. I just avoided using those words in case they create the pitch. Perfect. So given that understanding, I've got a few questions about the client's objective and a few clarifying questions about the business. Is now the right time to ask those questions?
Yeah, please.
Excellent. Okay, so in terms of the objective, what's their main objective here, and when do they want it delivered by?
Yeah, good question. It's really to understand what's been going on with profit. And so specifically, they'd like to know, what would be the quantitative impact? How much could they increase their profit by if they pursued the actions? And their timeline is basically as soon as possible. That's why they've brought in the likes of McKinsey.
Got it. Anything else? Anything that they don't want to happen?
No, I don't think we have much further information on that.
Okay. So just to clarify, I'm not an expert in security software. Can you say a thing or two about how Bulletproof makes money?
Yeah, great question. So let's put our 2005 hat on. So back in the old days, people used to actually pay for antivirus software. So let's imagine that our customers are both consumers and businesses. So we're both B2B and B2C, and we sell a CD-ROM antivirus security product, just to simplify it.
So it's a product rather than a service.
Correct.
Okay, understood. And who do they sell to and where?
Yeah, so let's imagine that they sell in electronic shops to consumers. And then they also have, let's imagine they have sales reps for the B2B side who are kind of selling the product to businesses.
And has anything notably changed in the industry in the last year that might be part of this problem?
Not that we know at this point.
Okay, moving on to the problem. Have they looked at anything in particular yet to address this, or at the very start of their journey?
Start of the journey.
Okay.
On the clarifying questions and framework, first thing that Paul does well here is he asks good clarifying questions to ensure that he really understands the business model. Notice that he asks who they sell to, has anything recently changed for the business or in the market? These are good clarifying questions that he asks.
I think that's probably enough to be going on with. How about I take a moment to structure an approach to think about this, then we can talk about it afterwards.
That sounds great. Yeah, take your time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as I understand it, our client's concern is profitability.
Mm-hmm.
So, a way to help them would be to look at how they can either reduce costs or increase their revenues. In terms of costs, we can look at the fixed and variable costs, particularly. One thing I didn't ask: products. Do they have multiple products or just one product?
Yeah, good question. They do have two products. We don't need to worry too much about differences in what the products do. But product one is called NZA, and product two is called SWA. And we can think of them as similar antivirus security products.
Okay, that really helps. So the easiest way to address profit is going to be to reduce their costs. They seem to be scaling along with the revenues. So we want to look at the cost base, perhaps by product, given they've got two different products, and over time. And having done that internal examination, it may be worthwhile looking externally at what their competitors' costs look like. So that would be the cost side of things.
Sure.
We also work at the revenue side of things, again, over time and against those two different product lines.
Yeah.
Probably focusing in the first instance on price, because a price increase would go straight to the bottom line. We could look at volume too, but of course, volume, the profitability change, and that depends on the cost base. So that's why we want to look at the costs first. And having looked internally at their revenues, I'd like to look at externally. What are the competitors' prices looking like? And what are the competitors' quality looking like? So is there an opportunity to charge more? So those are the two broad areas. So without any of the numbers yet, does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. On the framework, Paul takes a hypothesis-driven approach here. Specifically, he mentions that the problem may be driven by price, and you can notice he really drives into that in his framework. Lastly, Paul proactively suggests benchmarking our client's performance against competitors. This is often a good way to diagnose whether there's been a market-wide problem or if this is a specific issue to our client. Why don't we actually start? We do have some information. I think you mentioned historicals. So we do have some information on our revenue and profit over the last 2 years. So if you give me one moment, I'll just share my screen. Okay. So feel free to take a few seconds to you take your time to digest it, and then you can kind of talk me through any takeaways that you have.
Let me talk you through how I'm digesting it. So this is showing revenue and profit for 2005 and 2006. And we've got a couple of bars for each of those, pardon me, for each of those years, showing 1 billion revenue in 2005 and 1.1 billion in 2006. However, despite that 10% increase in revenue, we see that the profits are flat at 160. Which makes me even more keen to look into the cost base. Have you anything that can tell me something around how the costs and revenues break down for each of these two products, and if possible, over time?
Yeah. So why don't I go to our next chart? So I think this should be what you're looking for. So we've got a bit more of a breakdown and the two products that I mentioned.
Got it. Yes, so this is looking at the product level breakdown of revenue and profit. I've got a revenue chart which breaks down those 1 billion and 1.1 billion revenues for 2005 and 2006, broken down by these two different products, MZA and SWA. And we notice just under that bar chart on revenue that the revenues from MZA have dropped slightly from 0.5 billion, and the SWA revenue has increased from 0.4 to 0.6. So it's a 50% hike in 1 year. Let me squint at the notes just to note differences in SWA software cost driven by. Okay, so it seems to be taking more people to deliver SWA than it takes to deliver MZA. Which, when I look at the right-hand side of this chart, seems to be borne out. In terms of that product line profitability, we can see that COGS, what does COGS stand for?
Sure. So COGS is cost of goods sold.
So that's how much it costs to kind of produce the products, correct? So the cost of
buy the floppy disks. Exactly.
Floppy disks. That's lovely going back that far. Other SG&A. What's SG&A?
That's sales, general, and administrative. So we can think of that as
overhead.
overhead. Here we have compensation split out. So that's kind of another, let's think of it as another cost bucket.
Well, and you mentioned the software employees' compensation broken out. And just we learned from the note, it's taking more people to deliver the SWA product than it is the MZA product.
And
so,
can I just ask, I guess, intuitively, does that make sense? Like from your experience at McKinsey, like
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much more of a complicated product it might be.
Sure.
My instinct would be, well, can there be a way of delivering SWA with the same number of employees working on it as MZA? But at the moment, that's unclear. It does seem to be a place to look at early on.
Yeah.
So I would
agree.
get some tech experts in to say, is this the right thing? It could be simply teething troubles. What's happened with go from 0.4 to 0.6 billion in SWA revenue, there hasn't been a change in product breakdown. So it's possible as more of that work is done, there'll be greater efficiencies. So, I mean, let's just fantasize for a moment and say, if the SWA product cost, software employee compensation costs could be brought down to the same level as MZA, that would be 10%, a 10% of the revenue returned. So that would be 10% of 0.6 billion. So that would be $16 million in additional profit if SWA can be delivered with the same amount of labor as MZA. So let's put a pin in that perhaps and say, right, that might be available, but I would be probably overstating things if I said that was a guaranteed thing to happen right now.
Sure. Agreed. So not guaranteed, but let's say that we've kind of directionally floated that with the CFO and the CEO, and their view is very much, I know I'm hearing our head of engineering who's saying that SWA requires this many more people. Their view as the finance and team and CEO is that they don't buy it, and they think that the SWA team needs to be more efficient. So they like that emerging view that you've just proposed, and they say, yes, I think this $60 million is a saving that we should indeed kind of go after.
Well, how about we look at the flip side of that? So we've looked at kind of labor into the number of people.
Yes.
We haven't said much about, does that compensation sound about right? So having done that kind of internal comparison of product lines, I wonder if there's any data into the external comparison. What kind of compensation are competitors to Bulletproof seeing they have to pay to their employees doing similar kind of work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do have some data on kind of our competitor compensation, and also for our competitors' software employees, how they actually choose to allocate their workforces in terms of in the US or elsewhere. So same thing, feel free to take some time and you can kind of talk me through.
Okay, so this is called offshoring benchmarks and compensation differences. And we have two charts here. So the left-hand one, offshoring benchmarks. So percent of software employees offshore for comparable companies. So I hope I'm guessing correctly here. What that means is moving the software engineering out of the US to somewhere cheaper, be it Eastern Europe, be it Southeast Asia, but somewhere that isn't American prices. And we see that there are 3 competitive companies all doing quite a similar amount to this offshoring. So about 30% of their employees are now non-US. And if we look at us, which is I think the 0 at the end of that, or our client, there's no offshoring.
That's our client. Correct. So we're currently, our engineering headcount is entirely based in the US.
Okay. Now, if we look at the right-hand side of this chart in the compensation, we see the side of the prize, which is that the pay for software employees in the US is $100,000, and it's half that to the offshoring. Exactly. So there is an opportunity there to offshore some of the labor.
There are 4 things that Paul really does well on chart clearing. The first is that he talks the interviewer through the key axes, the insights, and the actionable recommendations and next steps based on the charts. So he's clearly framing what he's looking at and then explaining what matters and why. He has a really strong attention to detail. So notice that he pays attention to the footnotes, reads them out loud to me, and then also sort of puts into context why they matter and ties them into the charts. He has a really logical approach to explaining his takeaways and why the key insights matter to the client. This really strengthens his overall case performance. Lastly, he has a great sense of the additional data that he needs. So notice that he's calibrating what he has with what he would like, what would help him further crack the case.
And I suppose if that was to be done, we'd probably advise our client to do it across their product lines. So
Correct.
for MBA and SWA. That's going to need some calculation. So give me one second to think about what that calculation looks like.
For sure. And then feel free to talk me through kind of how you'd structure the math.
Okay. And I'm going to assume in this calculation that we haven't yet done that piece of work to bring the number of engineers down in SWA to deliver at the same rate as MZA. So
I think we could. Yeah, so I think we could assume that. So let's assume that the two gray segments are now the same, if that works, so that we're effectively spending kind of 20% of our overall revenue is on software employee compensation.
Okay. Well, in that case, the calculation would be to take the total revenue number, multiply that by the fraction of the revenue that is on software employees compensation.
Yeah, so let's assume that's 20%.
It will now be 20 across the board. Yeah. Absolutely right. We then want to multiply that by the percentage of these people who are offshore, and to multiply that by the fraction of compensation that one gives to offshore people versus people in the USA. So
exactly right.
Step by step, the total revenue is 1.1 billion.
Yeah.
The employee compensation fraction of that is 20% or 0.2.
Yeah.
The offshoring percentage is 30% or 0.3.
Yeah.
And then the compensation difference is, it's neatly done for us there. So that's 50 over 100, which is 0.5. So that leaves me with 1.1 times 0.2 times 0.3 times 0.5. And that...
Bit of a chunky calculation.
That's coming out to me at about 33 million.
Yeah, that's correct. And would you mind just kind of voicing in almost in words what that 33 million, like what is that? In terms, I guess, in words. So that's the savings from...
The 33 million is the saving available from offshoring our software employees at the same percentage as the client's competitors.
Exactly.
And paying them half as much as we currently do. I'm probably using we a little loosely there as being our client rather than us. But yeah, that's the calculation. Does that sound about right?
That sounds exactly right. On the math, firstly, Paul does a nice job of clearly explaining the approach he's going to take to the math before he jumps into the calculations. This really helps for the interviewer so that I can follow along how he's planning to approach it and also guide him if anything he's planning to do might be slightly off track. He intuitively explains the units of his calculations in applied terms. This is really important. Obviously, getting the number and the calculation correct is one piece, but then he also goes the extra step in explaining to me what this actually means in words so that we can both understand what that number is actually referring to. Lastly, he applies his real-world business intuition here. For example, he points out that he has more confidence in the offshoring recommendation than in the recommendation to right-size employee compensation, which makes sense. Just to kind of recap where we're at so far. So we think that kind of first potential cost saving was, I think, the $60 million figure that you gave. And so that was from basically sort of benchmarking or rationalizing our total software employee cost for one product to be in line with the other. So we think that's a potential, we put a pin in that as a potential $60 million saving. And now we've realized that versus our competitors, there's probably scope for offshoring some of our software employees. And we've quantified that at a $33 million saving. Is that right?
And there's a bit of interplay between the two.
Sure.
If our client was not able to make that initial $60 million saving on labor, then the proportion of saving they would get for offshoring would increase a little bit. So
Yeah.
there's a bit of give and take there. And
Okay.
just look at the numbers. I mean, I would say that there's probably more confidence in the offshoring number right now than in the labor number, because we just don't know enough about it.
Agreed. And we have a lot of data points here. Okay.
Well,
so we've
indeed.
looked on the...
So that's the cost side pretty much done. So I think the revenue side is worth a look. And I think, as you said at the outset, revenue is volume times price. Now, volume will kind of scale depending on the cost structure of the business, and we've found out that kind of there's COGS here and SG&A there. But pricing would be immediate bottom line improvement.
Sure.
So, is there data about Bulletproof's pricing in comparison with competitors? And to put that in context, anything about the quality of Bulletproof's product, because it may not be exactly the same as their competitors.
Sure. Yeah. So we do have one last chart. So hopefully that should give you some of the things that you're looking for.
Okay. So this is the pricing study. This is specifically for SWA. This doesn't include MZA.
Yeah, but that's correct. That's correct.
Yep. So let's look at the pricing study. So we've got SWA, which is Bulletproof's product. That's the 100 index. And everybody else seems to be 10% more expensive, more or less. Now, to just check whether there is some level of realism in whether the SWA price can be brought up to competitors, look at so customer satisfaction is the kind of quality measure that we have to play with it. And wow, got to be said that SWA is absolutely rocking it in terms of satisfaction, much more than its competitors. So, I mean, not wishing to go too crazy on this, one might imagine that if one could bring up the price of SWA to competitors, customers might still be happy to pay that because they're still getting a better product. So perhaps a recommendation for a client would be to up the price to be commensurate with the competitor products that clearly customers like less.
Yeah, so, I think that makes sense. And how would you sort of structure that math? And let me know if you need me to skip back to the first chart.
Well, I can just about remember. I can remember that 0.6 billion was the SWA revenues, up from 0.4 billion the year before. So that's simply 10%. So 10% of 600 million is 60 million. So there's another 60 to go out there.
Okay. So why don't we, I think that the CEO and the CFO are kind of banging at the door, keen for our recommendation. So why don't you maybe take your time and put a recommendation together, and then you can talk me through it.
Yes. Give me a moment for that.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay. So to recap for our client, the problem they were facing and are facing is a growth in revenue over the last year that has not led to a growth in profit. So they are trying to work out why and want to know how they can bring profits back into line with the revenue growth. The recommendation, and I'll come to why after the recommendation. So the recommendation, I think, in the first instance is to look at whether it's possible to deliver the SWA product with the same number of employees as deliver the MZA product. If that could be done, that could deliver 60 million in savings, and that would go to the bottom line immediately. The why question may come up here. So it looks to me that the why has revenue growth, why is profit growth, not max revenue growth? It's been a change in the product mix. So they are selling more of the product that takes more people to deliver it. So they could change the mix, or they could change the way that they deliver the SWA product. And frankly, if they have the customers, try and sell it to them. So there's maybe something up to 60 million savings available there. Second thing to do, if that has been process rationalized as best it can, is to look at offshoring. And offshoring is done by many of Bulletproof's competitors. around 30% offshoring. If they did that, that would deliver 33 million to the bottom line. Finally, they could look at pricing, and there looks to be an opportunity to increase pricing by 10%, which would be commensurate with the price of competitor products, which, by all accounts, are worse. So that seems like the right ordering. I think it would be slightly ambitious to start raising the prices whilst going through this process rationalization and offshoring. So maybe do another customer satisfaction survey when that has been done and revisit the price issue. So I think those are the kind of risks. There's a risk of oversimplifying SWA and not delivering it. There is always a risk on offshoring that might go horribly wrong, but starting early might really help. And then there's a risk around increasing price if quality has dropped, or for that matter, competitors' quality has increased. So look again after process rationalization and offshoring, again at pricing. Is there scope for doing that? And I would suggest that the CFO and CEO might want to meet with one of our partners and a tech specialist who could probably give some information and judgment around SWA labor costs.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate the strategic recommendation. On the recommendation, firstly, he clearly recaps the tangible problem the client is facing. That helps refresh for both of us exactly what we were here to solve. Secondly, he supports his recommendation with quantifiable impact. Notice that he uses the key numbers from throughout the case that he calculated. He provides structured numerical recommendations. He's also included the order of priority. So he makes it clear that the first lever would be a higher priority than the third one, for example. Lastly, he's done a nice job of laying out and explaining some of the risks to our client that they should be mindful of when they follow the recommendation.
Hello, I really hope you found that useful. If you did, you can like and subscribe. And why not come on IGotAnOffer.com to see more videos like this, study case interview frameworks, and read company guides. There you can also practice for your upcoming case interviews with coaches from McKinsey, BCG, Bain, and other consulting firms. Thank you and good luck with your upcoming interviews.